Here we are again. I'm going to talk about the Zionisms thing and hopefully wrap that up today. It's actually a really big subject, and it would take quite a while to go through it all. But that's what reading that book is for. And by the way, there's been many books written from many points of view on Zionism. It's a big deal. People don't realize how big a deal it really is. Right. So I posted a few things on Facebook Globe Hackers recently. One is by my friend Indica, who called Earth's Lung and Us. The other one is Patrick Laurence, Deaf and Blind, The Maladies of American Diplomats. This is really interesting because he read an obituary of a person that he knows and is familiar with, Moorhead Kennedy, who was one of the hostages during the Iran hostage crisis in 1979 through 81, I think it was, or something like that. And he's just talking about how this guy was able to learn to see things through another person's or other people's perspectives, which is something I'm always talking about. That's very important and necessary for us to learn how to do if we're going to be living in peace. Uh, and that's important to some of us. So he wrote a book called The Ayatollah in the Cathedral, Reflections of a Hostage in 1986. So many Iranians disoriented, forced to think in new and strange ways, to perform unfamiliar tasks in accordance with unfamiliar norms, humiliated by their inadequacies as they tried to behave as Westerners and disinclined to become proximate Westerners, second class at best, sought above all for a renewed sense of their own identity. Also, when you think about it, it's not just that the U.S. overthrew the Iranian government several times and overthrew the Shah. They did it, you know, they want the oil. They want to control the resources. It's not about democracy and freedom. That's a joke. So the idea that you want people to become American and somehow if you're American, you're going to be liberated, is foolish. But anyway, different people have different cultures, different ways of doing things. Look, some of them are really, really bad, but most of them just aren't. So live and let live, in my opinion. So what else does he say here that was interesting? Oh, the line of thinking we call perspectivism. So I guess I'm talking about perspectivism a lot. The recognition that none of us has a monopoly on truth, values, or interpretations of reality has been around since Nietzsche pondered it in the late 19th century. Moorhead Kennedy is what it looks like in practice, on the ground, reading at a desk while captive. So here's a nice quote. He says, they live in a bubble, he said, of the Biden regime's policy cliques and do not perceive outside signals that go against their preconceptions. He went on to say of the Atlantic nations as a whole, we feel not an ounce of trust, which triggers political and even emotional rejection. So on a personal anecdote, I've mentioned many times that I traveled a lot, and never been banged up abroad, etc. When I was young, I had friends at public school. I went to a private school in the United States, which means a fancy school. And I had friends in public schools, and some of my fancy school friends were afraid to go to the public schools with me because they were afraid of Black people or Hispanic people or people who weren't like them, not as posh, to use the British terminology. But they were afraid to go, and the fear is palpable. People notice it and they take it as a sign of disrespect. If I show you that I'm afraid of you, you wonder why. Why are you afraid of me? What have I done to you to deserve your fear and distrust, And it creates a feeling of bad blood, and people don't like it. It makes people angry and frustrated. If you go around the world and treat people with respect and show them that you're not afraid of them, that actually you're curious about their way of life and you want to learn from them about their values, their way of seeing things, people treat you well. I mean, I've just always been that way naturally, and I've had so much good fortune in India, Africa, in Russia, in Europe, in Japan, in China, in Thailand. And I think we should have leaders and diplomats who understand that. But anyway, a lot of people just say, well, that's not the way it is, dude. I've got to go sign up and go to war and get vaporized by, a kamikaze drone. Well, have at it. It's just stupid. What a waste. So another thing I posted, moral philosophers are beginning to incorporate insights from evolutionary biology. So Figs in Winter, my friend Massimo Pigliucci is writing from a Stoic point of view, and he's talking about the hedonistic schools, Cyrenaics and Epicureans of the Hellenistic times, and utilitarians of the 19th to 21st century. So he does a little brief overview of that, and then he discusses the work he talks about John Stuart Mill, and he talks about Jeremy Bentham, these utilitarians. And then he discusses some work by some academics now in evolutionary biology. So, he said, my dictionary defines axiology as the study of the nature of value and valuation and of the kinds of things that are valuable. One of the central questions in axiology is what elements can contribute to the intrinsic value of a state of affairs? So worth, value. So he's talking about pain, pleasure, what feels good, what feels bad, and how it's a good article. So we quote from these academics, we argue that we should understand pain and pleasure through their role in evolution as mechanisms which, when functioning properly, motivate us to avoid what is bad for us and do what is good for us. Given this evolutionary perspective, the value of pain and pleasure is always and purely instrumental. So he likes that. Cato the Younger, a friend of Cicero, explains the Stoic system. He contrasts it with the Epicurean view by way of what is referred to as the cradle argument. Here it goes. So, quote, it is the view of those whose system I adopt that immediately upon birth, for that is the proper point to start from, a living creature feels an attachment for itself and an impulse to preserve itself and to feel affection for its own constitution and for those things which tend to preserve that constitution. While on the other hand, it conceives an antipathy to destruction and those things which appear to threaten destruction. In proof of this opinion, they urge that infants desire things conducive to their health and reject things that are the opposite before they have ever felt pleasure or pain. This would not be the case unless they felt an affection for their own constitution and were afraid of destruction. But it would be impossible that they should feel desire at all unless they possessed self-consciousness and consequently felt affection for themselves. This leads to the conclusion that it is love of self which supplies the primary impulse to action. Pleasure, on the contrary, according to most Stoics, is not to be reckoned among the primary objects of natural impulse. Anyway, it's very interesting to look at this article. I love Massimo. Figs and Winter is a wonderful blog. A lot of wisdom there. And very, prescient for today. Yeah, so Massimo is great. All right, I'm going to move on to Zionism's